All right, everyone. So, really excited about today's episode. I think one of the reasons that I would continue to listen to the Choose FI podcast, week after week, month after month, is to hear the stories of individuals that have kind of worked through different obstacles, the lessons they learned along the way. And specifically, lessons are great, but what's the actionable takeaway? What can I take away selfishly, me as a listener? What can I take away and implement this week or over the coming months to make my own life better? Is there something in this episode that I could share with a friend or family member that is stuck at a particular pace? And here is the goal today. We have this opportunity to talk with Amy. Now, Amy is her actual name. She actually has been blogging with anonymity for the last year, but her content is really resonating with the financial independence community. And she's really talking about inspiring, individuals in their mid-20s to build significant wealth, regardless of what their income is at this moment. We can always focus on how do we retrain, rescale, remarket ourselves to make more. But what does it look like for us to optimize our 20s? Because if we do that, everything just gets easier. For those of you that are like, well, what is her blog? Maybe you've heard of it. WeWantGuac.com. I suspect that's a little play on the whole avocado toast. We'll talk about that. But we're going to get into her story and we're going to talk about how do you go, you get this entry-level job that's paying $30,000 a year. You have this $100,000 degree. There's a disconnect, right? You have a degree that costs a ridiculous amount of money. You get out and your first job is only paying $30K. What are your options? Is saving something that you have to entirely write off? What does it look like to optimize from here and be able to be in a position of strength going into your mid-20s, early 30s? To help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. And yeah, this story, Amy's story, has a little bit of everything. It's fantastic. She hit a net worth of $100,000 at 25. But lest you think this was some preordained path, Jonathan, as you mentioned, she started out with a salary in the $30,000 range. And just in the last couple of years, she's tripled that by learning skills and learning how to market herself. I mean, that in and of itself is a story. But she started off as she calls it, the ultimate cheapskate. And she feared money, but she decided to be better for herself. I mean, that is just such a critical lesson on the path to FI, because some people do start from that point of deprivation and then they realize, wow, I can be open. I can figure this out and live a life that I want to live into, right? Design that life. So, Amy, with that, welcome to Choose FI.
Thanks so much for having me. You guys are huge flatterers.
That's what we do. Full of flattery. But no, we're impressed. Let's just be realistic for a second. At 26 years old, my net worth was probably right around negative 100,000. Maybe I was paying off my student loan debt, so I was back to like negative 80, something like that. Your net worth today that you shared on your blog just hit $150,000. Wow.
Right.
First of all, congratulations. I know you're aware of what a big deal that is because you've shared on your blog. Like, it's just everything gets easier when you pass that first 100K. For you to be able to do it this early, you're almost in coast mode. I mean, everything's all right. We won't spend too much time there. Like myself, I had to dig my way out of student loan. Let's talk about advantages just for a second here. We're being intellectually honest. Your parents helped with school, right? And so
Yes,
you
that's right.
graduated school with no student loan debt. Now, I'm not going to put that on you. That I just wanted to say for the audience here that, first of all, the cost of your education, and I'm sure maybe there's some combination of scholarships, grants, parents help out with money, without getting into the weeds on that. If someone had just front-loaded, fully funded their 529s and said, I'm just going to pay sticker price, the sticker price for your education would have been like $100,000. $100,000 for your education. And that is not just necessary. I mean, I'm sure it was a great school, but that's actually kind of the average cost. The average cost in 2019 for college over a 4-year period is $122,000. That's the sticker price that's being advertised. And what I just want to say to our audience real quick is we're going to go ahead and start from the place that Amy did not have to dig her way out of the student loan debt. But my hope for many of you, especially those of you that are listening to this show, planning out the next several years, is that none of you are digging your way out of 6 figures of student loan debt, because none of us are willing to pay $100,000 for a degree. We're going to do it with a little bit more intention. We're going to figure out how to get it for less. And I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way. I wanted to say that even though you had this degree with a sticker price of $100,000, you did not graduate and go directly into a job that made $100,000+ a year, did you?
No, I did not.
All right. So tell us like what was the degree you got? What was the job you landed and what salary?
Yeah, definitely. So I graduated from college in spring of 2016 with a degree in communications. I also had a degree in international relations, but I don't really use that. Um, and actually at the time of graduation, I had no idea what was going to happen in the future because I graduated without any job offers at all. The only thing I got paid for at that time was basically weekend waitressing gigs. And otherwise, I was thinking, okay, well, what am I actually going to do? I don't have any way to kind of afford how to live here in Boston. And a month went by too after graduation, and I still didn't have anything. I only got a job in July of 2016, and that wasn't actually through traditional means. I went ahead and contacted a temp agency that I'd worked with in the past, and they had got me in right away with a full time job, making $15 an hour.
All right. I spent a lot of time on this setup because that is actually the part that I wanted to get to. The disconnect between this very expensive degree and that first job. At what point on this degree process did you realize that the job wasn't just guaranteed? Because there probably was a point earlier where you said, "Oh, I'm getting a degree and then I'll get a great job."
Right, because that's what society always tells you. Like, oh yeah, go ahead and go to college, get a degree, and that's your ticket to the good life. But then the longer that I would stay in college, the closer that the graduation day came near, the more that I started noticing, the people around me and the people that have graduated before I have. Were still not making inroads with networks, still weren't getting the jobs that they had hoped to get. And I was thinking, oh, so I'm in some trouble here.
Mm.
If 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 I was, lied to, going into this.
Right. That's what society always tells you. That quote,
Hmm.
it's incredible. And yeah, I mean, I can only imagine that feeling, right? Like you've done everything right. You've done everything that society told you. And now you're 22. And to Jonathan's point, you don't have student loan debt, which is wonderful, but you're an adult and you need a job. I mean, like, what does that feel like at that point? Like scrambling and wondering, what am I qualified for?
Hmm. Yeah, I actually call that year my year of fear on the blog because I really, I was just terrified of what was going to happen. I didn't have that much in terms of savings. I I felt like a failure that I wouldn't be able to, like really hack it in the world that we live in.
So you went through this temp agency. They landed you in a job that made $15 an hour. And at that point, was that so that was full time, but you were still working through the temp agency? Is that how it worked? Or did you eventually like really quickly get a full time job with this company?
Yeah, so the way that the temp agency worked was that 6 months had to go by with working in your temp position before there was a possibility of becoming permanent in the job. So pretty much the rest of 2016, I was on that $15 an hour, working full time and still doing waitressing over the weekends. So not too many days off in that time, but that was what was necessary to kind of assuage my fears a little bit.
I think our goals when we create these episodes are focused on different aspects of your financial life. And that first job is a massive piece. And actually, I think in my mind, when we're looking at picking a career and making the choice to go to college and whether or not you should take out student loan debt, that there's all of those. But then that separation between, all right, I'm a junior or senior, and now I realize suddenly that I have a degree, but the employer doesn't care. They don't know what to do. It's just they check the box, and I don't know how to convince the employer that if they give me the chance, I'm going to crush it. And
Hmm.
I'm curious if you were to think about now with the benefit, like now you actually have experience. There is stuff that you've done. You worked at a temp agency, you did some work, you're building on your body of work. But if you were
To have the benefit of hindsight.
benefit of hindsight and you're going back to that final year, maybe it's at that point that we start to feel that little bit of fear sitting on your shoulder and you're realizing, oh, I'm getting this degree, but I haven't done anything with it. I've just done really good at multiple choice tests. I've written a few papers and, whatever. I need to actually do something so I can explain to employer my value proposition for them. Like what if you could go back to that junior or senior year, you're getting a communications degree? what is the actual skill set that you possess coming out of college?
That is an excellent question, and one that I think that I had the average amount of skills that pretty much most folks graduating college would have, which is unfortunately inadequate for the realities of today, right? But that's not strictly their fault. So once you graduate from college, the obvious path is get a job. Some people will go to grad school, but the ultimate goal is get a job, get a good job, get a job that really pays you well and that justifies the 4 years that you had just sunk of your youth into going to school. And and with that, there's so much emphasis on getting in your prerequisites, getting good grades on what you got in college, but not so much on the realities of, okay, well, here's how to find mentors once you graduate in the fields that you want. Here's how to actually get jobs that you apply for, how to write out a resume that actually resonates with people, or a cover letter, or how to actually go through the Byzantine job application process that now exists. There's so much of that college students are just left on their own for, and not just college students, but even folks that decide to go on a different route. Basically, the way that job application processes work now is broken, and that's to the detriment of people who are just now starting off in their roles.
Is there any way that you could have supplemented the degree that you're getting, this communications degree, with actual skills that you could demo to employer with the benefit of everything that you know now? Like, what would be the skills that you could have paired with this communications degree to have made that initial round of applications much easier?
So I would argue it's not so much the skills that I would have, but just the actual reaching out and finding people who will actually agree to, meet with you to interview you in the first place. I'm sure most of my fellow 20 somethings will agree with me on this, but so often when it comes to applying for jobs, the job application process is going to Indeed or LinkedIn, finding a job that you qualify for, that you want. And then going to that company's portal and walking through the steps of adding your resume and then having to manually add your resume. And then, 9 times out of 10, you won't hear back from them at all. I would actually argue to flip the script. And instead of you going to these companies and asking if, can you please hire me? Instead, how to get those companies and their recruiters to you. That's something that I really emphasize on my blog, and that's what I actually point to when it came to being able to go from a $30,000 salary to a $93,000 salary, is to figure out how to market yourself on LinkedIn so that people will find you and go, hey, actually, I want to put you directly into the hiring funnel for this new role.
All right, Amy, this is amazing. So we had Chris Hutchins on episode 121R, and we entitled that How to Get Any Job. And he's basically talking about similar stuff, but from the CEO's perspective. Now, we have your perspective, right?
Mhm.
You're 22, 23. Obviously, now you're 26, but you have tripled your income essentially in
Yeah.
4 years and gone from a low $30,000 salary to 90. So you've figured out the secrets to life here. And I mean, this is what's going to help so many tens of thousands of people listening to this, right?
Mhm.
So talk us through, how would you describe that to somebody? How would you describe how to get that job? What makes you stand out? How do you get them to come to you? This is really, really the heart of this.
Yeah, that really is. And again, it's something that it's not taught to you. And most people, when they talk about how you can improve your chances, it's about, oh, well, rewrite your resume or redo your cover letter, not this is how to market yourself so that people will find you and want you. I've actually done this a few times on the blog and in real life. I've had friends and other people in the finance community come to me with that help. Some of them I've actually even used as case studies for a couple different blog posts. And for a lot of those, it's starts off with first pulling out just first figuring out what you really want, right? Because if you don't know what kind of job that you want, you're basically marketing to everybody, which in the marketing world means marketing to nobody. So once you decide what you want, that could be, maybe in my case, I had a communications degree. What's great about communications is that you can go into pretty much any career that you want because all of them involve communication. So I did eventually choose marketing because I really enjoyed that particular niche of business needs. But I could have also gone into something like office administration or becoming an executive assistant, so on and so forth. Once I chose marketing, if I was doing this for myself, then I would start looking at the job titles and the job positions that I want. Right. So, in order to do that, I would go back and look up job applications. I wouldn't apply to those. I would just use those as a reference point. So, looking at those, let's use my current job title example of marketing manager. I want to be a marketing manager someday. Okay, so now I have this marketing job ad in front of me, and I'm looking at the job requirements, the descriptions of responsibilities, the jargon, and the way that these companies will write out what they're looking for in their next hire. That verbiage, that wording is what you're going to use when it comes to remaking your resume or your LinkedIn profile. Reason being, for twofold. One, once the hiring manager or the recruiter is reading your profile or your resume, and they're seeing things that are pretty much repeating what is already on the job ad, they're going, oh, well, this person's, perfect. They're, hitting all these points. You're just making it easy for them to really see yourself coming into the role. And then secondly is there's several HR departments out there that use algorithms and use technology to kind of narrow down the amount of job applications that they have. And in order to do that, they are going to heavily employ keywords. So the verbiage that they have in those job ads, those are the keywords that those algorithms, if they use them, are going to be looking for. So you're basically hitting the nail on the head with both the human side and the robot side with getting these people to realize this is the person that I want for the job. Let's call them. Let's figure this out.
I love it. Everybody has to learn SEO. Everyone has to learn keyword research. It's actually part of
Yes,
just not just having a blog, but getting your first job.
exactly.
Jonathan, I had a feeling that was going to make you happy to the depths of your soul.
And irritated at the same time. You know how long I spent just looking for the perfect words, thinking they were going to rest in my brain somewhere when I was writing my resume or my CV. And in this environment, you're just looking at, well, what do the employers actually say they want? Okay, these are the keywords that we're going to build our human version around.
Mm-hmm. Like instead of waiting for that eureka moment, jumping at the middle of the night, like I got it. This is what I exactly
Right,
need.
right.
No, just get it from the employers, and you're done.
Hey, Amy, real quick. I obviously we're going to keep moving with this process, but you said figure out what you want. That's the first step.
Mhm.
So I don't know about you. Obviously, this is much closer in your memory banks. But when I was 18, 20, 22, I had no idea what any jobs meant, not less what I wanted when I grew up, jokingly saying that. Like I had no idea. Like did you talk to other people, other friends that were in different industries? Did you research? Like how do you even go about figuring out what you want?
Yeah, I love that question because that's another huge skill that people just ignore and never actually build up is okay, well, how do I actually identify what I want out of life? For me in particular, I didn't know if I was going to go into marketing. For like since I was really little, I thought, you know what, I'm going to be a best-selling author like J.K. Rowling. I'm going to make the next Harry Potter series by the time I'm 20 and just live off of that the rest of my life, which obviously is not exactly the case and what most people also share the dream in. So instead, I started looking at okay, well, with the college major that I have, what's open to me? That's actually a big reason why I chose communications as my major was that I was like, well, I don't know, what exactly I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So let's just get a degree that I can apply to basically anything that I want. Um, And throughout college, there were several different paths that I was considering. At one point, I was like, maybe it'd be good to be a lawyer. Another time, again, I was thinking, well, maybe I could be an executive assistant. Maybe I could become a consultant. There were several different paths. And when it came to deciding what I actually wanted, I'm still, even at 26, I'm still thinking, well, maybe I won't do marketing, the rest of my career. Maybe I could see myself doing something like in product management or something that's more technical, or even, really going hard on my HTML skills and doing programming. So when I say figure out what you want, it's more of figure out what you want for the next couple of years. And then it's fine if you need to pivot or figure something else out. You just want a plan, you just want a direction, so that again you're not just like doing a spray and pray with your resume, right? You're having something that's a specialty. Employers don't generally look for somebody who's well-rounded. They're looking for somebody to fill a need that they have. So if you can show that you fill that need with your whatever your specialty is, then that's makes you so much more likely to get hired.
Let's talk about the pivot from $30,000 in this first job to you're making 90,000 in this new job. There's probably a little bit of, in your own mind at the time, imposter syndrome, just because there's such a space between those two. You're hoping they don't realize that you were just making 30, something internally, you know.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm curious to get that. At some point, did you recognize that, like, oh, I don't just have a degree, I actually have very real skills? Did you bring that with you into the additional conversation? What enabled you to make that jump? Were they aware of your prior salary? I don't think that's a question they're even allowed to ask, but some still do. What was that transition from 30,000 to 90,000, and what do you think really helped you nail it outside of, the LinkedIn keyword optimization?
Yeah, definitely. So for that, again, the script flips on its head. So instead of kind of going in and doing those kind of negotiations, when it came to transitioning from my first job out of college to my second job, um, that that negotiation for your salary was entirely pushed along by the recruiter that I was working with. So just to back up a little bit, for my first job, again, I started off as a temp role, making $15 an hour. In early 2017, I went perm and started making $20 an hour. So with that, I didn't have much choice in that because they already had known my salary beforehand, and they were like, "Yeah, why would you want more than $20 if you were already making 15?" So I was like, "Well, I don't know how I can argue that, so I guess." But going forward, I was thinking, $20 just isn't cutting it. I feel like I'm not, really, really living up to my full potential here. I'm not. I like it was very hard in that first job to actually move up. There really was no defined path to kind of advance in the company. So I was like, okay, so I can either kind of like lounge in this, like glorified receptionist role for 10 years, or I can move to a different company. So that's what I eventually ended up doing. Right around late 2017, I got a call from a recruiter, and he was really interested in working with me. He really liked the my LinkedIn resume and thought that I would do really well in some kind of hybrid sales and marketing job. So I was like, okay, let's do it. And with that, then we eventually got a job offer from a very small company in Boston, that was in the kind of like the luxury furniture realm. And then the recruiter went, okay, well, what's the salary range you want to get? So I was like, that's a good question. That's another thing too, is that when somebody asks you like, what kind of salary do you want? Your mind kind of wipes blank, going, okay, well, like what exactly should I be asking for here? What's the average? What would be reasonable? I don't want to be unreasonable and like turn them off completely. So with that, then I blurted out a range of, I want to say something like 55 to 65. And so the recruiter's like, okay, so 60. So I was like, yeah. And so then he's like, okay, thanks. And we hung up. 10 minutes later, he called me back. He was like, okay, we got it for 60. So I was like, all right, let's go. So with just that and just, one fell swoop, I was able to get a 50% pay increase with that move.
Did your tactics change at all between job 2 and job 3, or did you stay with the same company and get promoted to go from 60 to 90?
My tactics did in fact change. Once I saw the power that your profile can get once you really optimize it for the keywords that recruiters are searching for. I thought, okay, well, let's lean on this then and really see what's out there. And so once I really optimized it, one of the big things that I did was adding just skills where I was like, well, I don't know if this is relevant, but maybe it might be. That turned out to be a golden goose for me because I happen to have some HTML skills, and I had rather unwittingly tapped into this particular niche in the marketing field that requires technical marketers, where that basically means people who have a marketing mindset but can also really understand coding behind a lot of the programs that you need in your marketing stack. So with that, then I suddenly started getting quite a few recruiters reaching out, going, "Hey, this is exactly what we're looking for this particular company or this big company, this like unicorn startup. Can you let's make a call, let's start calling them, let's figure this out." And with that, then I got a new role, my current role, where my starting salary in this role that I'm in now was 86,000. So I started my second job with 60,000, and then in job number 3, I got to 86.
This is really cool. And what I'm noticing here is there's a skill, you know how to value your worth, you know how to present it in a way that
Mhm.
an employer can see your worth. That's how you're really squeezing all of the juice out of this. And then, but I actually wanted to, even in the language you used internally, it was something along the lines of you knew how to communicate your actual, you even said a skill stack. And I wanted to talk about, you have these, you said my marketing stack. And then on top of that, I found myself by being able to market my HTML skills, I was able to get there. I'm just thinking, if you look back now over the last 10 years, when people say, what do you do? You could say, well, I'm in marketing. But when it's actually what do you do or what skills do you possess? What is it that you bring to a company? Is it leadership?
Mhm.
Is it copywriting? Like if you think about what is your actual stack that you possess now that would be on this resume that you would match up to an employer's needs? What does that look like for you? Not from a keyword basis, but from like an individual that realizes it's skills more than degrees that's getting you this 93, but they don't know how to communicate what skills they have. We always answer, what do you do with like a single word? I am this. But I think
Mhm.
I want to know, but what are you capable of doing for a prospective employer? What is your skill stack?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So, if let's say I was talking with somebody who, was a fresh college grad, and they were like me, and they couldn't find, any roles, like nobody was calling them back, and they couldn't find a job. Um, I would sit them down and go, okay, well, first of all, let's make sure that you are marketing yourself towards the job roles that you want to get. I'll bring up an example. There was a recent resume that and profile that I had helped out a friend with. I had met him on Twitter actually, and he was going, yeah, like it's like my role was actually like I was actually laid off this year in 2020, and I haven't been able to find new jobs since. So I was like, okay, well, let's look at your resume and kind of see how you're marketing yourself to the roles that you want. And for him in particular, um, there were some things that I brought up that I don't think a lot of people realize that you should bring up. So one big example is I see a lot of skill sections on resumes. People always think that a skill section is needed, and sometimes it is if you're going into something that's very technical and they need to know that you, for example, can speak or you can code these different programming languages that they use. That's important. But if you're going into something that's more people oriented, or more something that's not so specialized and technical, the skill section I really don't think is relevant. His skill section, you could tell that it was something that he just thought that he needed, but the skills in it were just the most basic ones, like Microsoft Suite and very punctual. Or I'm like, and like anybody with half a brain can have like these skills here. So let's just knock this out entirely. Um, his particular skill set was focused on data analytics,
Mm.
and really finding patterns in data sets. So I was like, okay, well, let's focus on that. The way that you kind of word things in the way that you describe like your jobs doesn't say any of that. It's more stuff like processing numbers on a weekly basis for reports to the boss. Where no, let's take the direct verbiage that's still true to what you're doing, and put that into your resume so that we can revamp that and really show that, hey, this person has the skills that you're looking for, and you know that because that's the wording that they use.
Amy, something you said before, you said you're adding skills that may not be relevant, right? So that was something you said in passing when you're talking about HTML and
Mhm.
adding that to, I assume you mean to your resume at that point. So there are lots of marketing people. There are lots of marketing managers. There are
Yes.
very few with HTML skills, no
Yes.
matter if it's rudimentary or significant advanced HTML skills, right? Like this is the epitome of the talent stack that we've been talking about on this podcast for years, right? It's you don't have to be world class at anything. But if you are even in the top 20% or 30% even with a variety of skills, then you stand out almost invariably. So again, right? Like you may be world class at both marketing and HTML, but frankly, you almost didn't have to be, right? Like because that intersection, there's so few people that have that intersection. And I'm curious. So yeah, I'd love to hear your reaction to that first. And then second, are there other skills that you're thinking about adding that you've identified that could help you moving forward in a similar way to how this, oddball HTML helped you so much get this incredible job with an $86,000 salary?
Yes. So I love that you brought that up, Brad, because a phrase that I think perfectly encompasses that is, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? And I mentioned this on the blog too. You don't need both eyes to really shoot yourself to the stars. You just need to have a little bit more direction than what you have now. You just need to be a little less blind. You don't need to have 20/20 vision on this. You don't have to jump into this being like an absolute master or like a total wizard at whatever you do. It really boils down to what do companies need out there? What are the job requirements? And how can I best meet those needs?
I love that we're talking about skill stacks right now because there's something to me that is tied to this, and I want to go back actually to your website. I believe at the beginning of last year, and you can correct me on the time on that. You started wewantguac.com, and the website's fantastic. You've done a ton of articles, incredibly valuable on there, and we'll go into a few of them. But I just want to point out from the perspective of someone that's focusing on building their skill stack, it's not just HTML that you can put in the skills section now. As someone that's thinking about what have I done and what am I a little bit better at than someone who isn't trying, tell us from a skill stack perspective how creating this, even if your blog never made $1, how valuable is the skill stack that's coming out of this? I'd love your perspective on that.
Yeah, definitely. So I started We Want Guac in January of this year, January 2020. And when I first started, it was because for the last year or two beforehand, I kept writing out little things to myself, going like, oh, like I want to see something like this in different fire blogs or different finance blogs, because going from 2016 through till today, I have been reading up on all these different finance blogs, understanding, like now that I'm really climbing upwards on the corporate ladder and getting the salary to equalize that. How am I going to actually use that salary now? And it was all of the financial independence resources out there that showed me exactly this is what you should be going for with the salary that you're now getting.
So that's great. Clearly, as of today, right? You've been educating yourself, obviously, with all these blogs, but 2016 you described as the year of fear, right?
Mhm.
And that you used to fear money specifically,
Oh my
right? Like
God, yeah.
how does that change so quickly? It's not clearly it is not just the salary, right? Like there has to be
Mhm.
something internal that changed. And I'd love to hear like that evolution.
Yeah, I agree. So So for my perspective in 2016, there like the first half of the year, I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to stand up on my own 2 feet. I couldn't hack it in the world that we live in. And then there was a month or so where I thought that was the reality. Until I got a job. Then the second half of 2016 was still fear about, well, I have 2 jobs now that I'm working, but they're still pretty low, like they're low wages. Let's be honest, in Boston, which is the most expensive place to live outside of New York and California, how like there it's very very difficult, if like almost skirting towards impossible to have that low of a salary and still make it with your living situations around here. Um, and going with that, as you guys said, I was the ultimate cheapskate. I look back at some of the antics that I would pull in order to like save a dime, and I would just cringe. So one big example was, instead of going in and getting some low cost groceries at that time, I started pretty much haunting the campus and going to whatever events were around that offered food for college kids, which was definitely awesome at saving money. But like pretty much that entire time, it was just me just eating like greasy nasty pizza, and just like whatever stale crap that they had at the college cafes. So I definitely was not being that healthy in that time. There was another point where I went out to, oh, this one like really makes me like want to just like fall to the floor. I was at a restaurant once with a couple of friends. And then once I had ordered something that was a relatively small dish. Once the check came and we decided to split it between the three of us, I was freaking out a little bit because my friends' dishes were slightly more expensive than mine. So I was like, I wasn't expecting to give this much. Like what am I like? If we're splitting this evenly, I don't know how to tell them like, oh, I'm only paying for my stuff. That just seems like wrong.
Internally, you were going through an existential crisis.
Oh my god, yeah. Where it was over maybe like $5. It was ridiculous. But like the worst part about it was that when it came time to like give them a tip, we were pulling our money together, and I was like, oh, I can save on the tip. But we had already decided on how much we would each contribute to the tip. And obviously it ended up coming up short because I kept back a couple of dollars. And my 2 friends were like, we're short a couple dollars. And I was like, wow, how? That's so weird. And and they were just like looking at me like we
We
like they
to
know.
both,
be clear,
yeah,
you're
they
not
knew.
proud of this moment.
No,
No,
no, no.
I'm not proud at all. I show it solely as my like one of my worst money moments of falling flat on your face. Like a lot of people have issues with like overspending money. I was the extreme exact opposite of that.
Was it just earning more that got you out of this, or was there something else that enabled you to find a balance point? Because clearly saving money has not been a problem. I mean, the results speak for themselves.
Mhm.
$150,000 saved at the age of 26 years old. Um, but it seems like you don't have regrets about that saving. This isn't all I made 150,000 by not tipping the way I should have and by eating free food on this. I clearly earned more. Like, but is it just earning more, or is there some sort of like mindset shift around finding that balance point at the various income levels that you were at?
Yeah, that's an awesome question because so many people think that, okay, well, once I get this raise, once I get this promotion, then my life will be on track. But that's really not true. There is such a thing as something that I've heard called before, the high earning poor, where it doesn't matter how much money that you're making. If you're still spending all of that and still living paycheck to paycheck, you're still living in a very precarious financial situation, whether you're making $30,000 a year or $300,000 a year. And I've heard this, talked about pretty frequently, but it bears repeating. It's not so much about how much money you make, it's about how much you spend and how much you save, right? So with that, then it was learning, okay, well, obviously making more money will help hugely. Because if you only focus on that one side of the coin of lowering your expenses and really upping your savings, there's only so much that you can cut from the bone until you're like really hurting yourself and digging into the bone. But if you take that lowering expenses and you add it to the other side of the coin, which is increasing your income, then all of a sudden you're able to accelerate the amount of money that is at your disposal that you can then use to go and invest properly, and really set yourself up for life.
It is amazing how that deprivation mindset can change, right?
Mhm.
And like you said, you certainly don't look back proudly on that moment, right, at all.
No.
But but you understand, like, you were in a place of deprivation where those dollars, you at least you thought every single dollar, I need to clutch onto this because I'm not secure, right?
Mhm.
I think that at the heart of it was part of the issue. And I mean, I can look back at times in my life where I had that deprivation mindset and I was, maybe even miserly with some of my money. And now, because I'm in such, not just the dollars in my net worth, but I'm in such a more secure place psychologically. Like,
Mhm.
now I pride myself on, when I go to restaurants, doing like the exact opposite of that, which is giving really wonderful tips. Because to me,
Mhm.
it's like, I know those couple dollars don't make any difference to me whatsoever, but they make the difference between a 20% tip and a 26% tip, or whatever it may be, right? And that feels good.
It does,
And
yeah.
right. And I mean, people are working so hard. Like, so it feels good internally because you're not coming from that place of scarcity anymore. So
Right.
it's cool to see that you, in just such a short time, and that took me a long time. I'm not gonna lie here. So I mean, you've overcome that in a fairly short period of time. And were there any specific, and I know sometimes it's hard even in the not so distant past, but like, any specific inflection points that jump out to you, that like, that where you remember, like, oh, the old me would have done this, but the Amy of today is doing this.
Yes, 100%. The major change was creating a budget. And so many people go like, well, that doesn't make sense because budgets are like to constrain your spending and to keep your spending in like these particular limits. But for me, budgeting meant that I could show myself the numbers and go, okay, so I'm actually able to spend more money on, say, groceries than I probably would have actually spent on myself. It showed me that the limits were actually much bigger than what I had previously assumed that they would be, which meant that once I looked at that, I could go, okay, let's take a breath now, and realize that, okay, you can actually like you can relax now. You don't have to like defend your wallet to the death and like at knife point or anything like that. That's not necessary. So that really gave me the freedom and the I want to say it really gave me the permission to spend money on myself, to put it towards, like you said, to generous tips at restaurants, to helping out friends in need, to helping out other people that I know who may be in worse financial straits, and giving to charity. So all of that has been able to really show me that, hey, like this is totally in your purview. You're going to be completely fine. Just stick to the plan, stick to the budget, and you're good. And that made all the difference for me personally.
I absolutely love that. It reminds me of a quote that Jocko Willink, who has a very popular podcast, he's a former Navy SEAL. He says, discipline equals freedom. And he doesn't mean it in the sense that, like, oh, you have to be hardcore about every second and be disciplined and all this other nonsense. It's exactly how you described. It's setting up this framework, right? This budget was your discipline that gave you the freedom to show yourself that those limits were bigger. To use your words, your
Hmm.
limits were bigger than you ever could have imagined, right? And it gave yourself this internal permission, this freedom to move beyond that scarcity. I think that is the single best example I've ever heard of that. So just sincerely, thank you. That was brilliant.
My pleasure. And kind of going off that discipline thing a bit, I completely agree with that. I've joked before that I'm probably the like one of the least disciplined people like ever in the finance world because when it comes to my budget, I've seen other budgets where they kind of go over every single line item. Like I spend this much on clothing, I spend this much on like I don't know like Cheetos at the at the convenience store. Where for mine it's more of like okay, well like I'll spend this much on food, this much on rent, this much on my cell phone, and this much for everything else. Boom, done. And I normally fall under the budget with that, but I'm like, I don't care. That just means more money for later in the year. So really it's not about like obsessing over every single little penny. It's just, okay, well, I know that they're in the right budget buckets. So yeah, we're good.
All right. So I want to actually go back to your website and I want to talk about one article that really I think is important for people to hear. Now, the name of the website, wewantguac.com. And the tagline here, the path to wealth in your early 20s. Tell us what the
Yes.
goal is for this website. Now, we'll dive into this article in a second, but what is the overarching goal for this website? Keeping in mind, I suspect that whole marketing thing that we said earlier, if you're marketing to everybody, then you're essentially marketing to nobody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly that. So I started the blog because there's obviously a major financial disconnect in American society, right? So there was an actual study done on the financial literacy of Americans. And the way that it did that was asking them three very basic personal finance questions. And they were in the veins of okay, well, imagine the interest rate on your savings account was 1% a year. If inflation was 2%, could you buy like more with that account or less? And it was stuff about well, is this true or false? Buying a single company stock is a better return than a stock mutual fund. And so it's stuff that for people who have been in the fire world for any amount of time would be like, oh yeah, these are like easy stuff done.
So let me ask you a clarifying question for our audience, just in case any of us are sitting there feeling a little insecure about our ability to answer those questions. The first one is asking whether or not Americans understand the eroding nature of inflation on their present value dollars. That's the point of the
Yes.
first question. The point of the second question is it inherently more risky to be invested in one company or a collection, a pile of companies? That was the point of the second question, right? Okay.
Yes,
All right.
exactly. Exactly for those. And and 7 out of 10 people are not able to correctly answer these questions, which blows my mind because they should be basic knowledge, but the fact that they're not means that we as a society, whether it's our educational system or just impersonal doing some kind of um, PSA, we need to really do better to have folks understand how to manage their money and how to understand it. So I started this off because with everything that I'm currently learning, I wasn't seeing that represented online. It wasn't about it was stuff about like, oh yeah, like it's amazing to create seven-figure wealth, like let's become a millionaire, but becoming like maybe 100,000 millionaire is also pretty freaking
Can we
awesome
talk about
for what.
six figures for just a second? Let's not gloss
Yes,
right over that.
please. Let's not gloss over it. Such a huge thing, especially when you're still in your 20s too. I actually did the math on this and figured out that, if you're 25 years old and if you want to never save a penny again for your retirement at, let's say traditionally 65, then you would need to have a little over 60,000. You want to have 60 or $65,000 in some kind of index fund account, assuming the historical averages of that investment
So
growth.
for clarity here, we're saying if you're 25 years old with $60,000 in an index fund, that will be $1 million at traditional retirement. Is that what you just?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep, that's it. So if you have that, then you don't have to worry about retiring. You don't have to worry about like, okay, well, I need to make sure that I don't have like some kind of midlife crisis and like dip into this fund. But if you just let it ride, then you're going to become a millionaire. And then I looked at that, and then I looked over at how much money that I have invested, and how much money I had total. And at the time, that was 100,000. So I looked at that, going, okay, well, if I just let this ride, and just wait until it becomes $1 million, I could retire by the time I'm 50. And now that it's at 150, I'm like, okay, I could retire now in my 40s. And if I keep going and if I keep accelerating with that, I could go, well, look at that. I could retire in my
And
30s.
all of this is,
So
and it's important to point out that all of this is predicated on you never having to save another dollar again. Like what you're describing is by virtue of the momentum that I had up to this point, if I suddenly turned everything off and just said I'm going to be paycheck to paycheck for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, the work I've done is good enough to get me to the goals that many people have when they have this awakening in their 40s and 50s.
yes, exactly that.
All right, so let's talk to the 20-year-olds because the 20-year-old's talking about $1 million. It seems too far away, right? It's like
Yeah.
we're like, all right, that's great. I'm sure at some point I'll figure it out. But let's talk about the power for a 20-year-old of having this goal of saving up, sometime over the next 6 or 7 years, saving up $100,000. In your mind, what is the sense of security that you personally get and you want your audience to get by having this as a, near to midterm goal?
Oh my God. It makes an incredible difference in your 20s to have that six-figure wealth. So there's so many things that can mean. If times are good, let's say that this is during a bull market and times are awesome. That means that at minimum, if you have that invested, you're looking at 5 figures in investment growth minimum. Averaged out over every year, which is amazing. If times are bad, like let's say now, like the world is pretty much on fire, that $100,000 means that you suddenly have the security that you would not have had otherwise, right? Or if you happen, if if basically the life throws everything it has at you and you're suddenly like up against a wall, that 6 figures means that you don't have to suddenly like fall into some kind of massive void, right? Um, you don't have to you suddenly don't have to worry about that. Once you have that, you obviously to build up that $100,000, you had to build up a financial skill set. You had to build up a talent stack, particularly for really building that up. So now that you have this awesome skill set, you can then deploy it for so much else in your life. You're basically with whatever goals and dreams that you have for what you want your life to look like. Um, now you can look at that $100,000 that you made in your 20s, which by the way makes you richer than half of America. You can go, well, what else am I capable of? I'm basically freaking unstoppable with this.
Freaking
Let's go and
unstoppable.
yes,
Hashtag.
let's get that guac.
Oh man, that is a great way to sum it up. And yeah, it is that security. It's that security to
Yes,
not hold on to every dollar as if it was your last. That
exactly.
is that's fantastic.
Yeah, 20-year-olds out there that, if you want to think about it as blue skies, what if you can finish your 20s with $100,000 of net worth? I think at every age we're grabbing you and saying, if this is your age now, what would it look like for us to be able to pull this off here? We have to start from where we are. You might have obstacles you have to work through that other people don't. I get it. But what would be a reasonable goal and how much brighter is the future if we could just crush this? So I guess for 20-year-olds and people that are young professionals that are looking for how can I optimize more, and they're very interested in your story, they want to follow up with you, maybe they like this idea of optimizing their resume to make more income, or really being able to set some goals that are attainable in their early 20s. Amy, what is the best way for them to connect with you and connect with your content?
Yes. So the best ways are via email and social media. My email is darcywantsguac@gmail.com. And you can find me on Twitter or Instagram by looking up We Want Guac blog.
Amy, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Wow. What an amazing episode. And we're so grateful for Amy for joining us on the show. I think what is more true now than ever is that we're not all on an identical path, but everyone does have a path. So let's look towards people that are in a similar life stage, have gone through similar obstacles as what we're dealing with. And instead of us trying to create our ideas from scratch, let's pull the best of and build a better life for ourselves. So definitely go check out Amy's site. And if maybe this is the first time that you're hearing this idea of financial independence and you're like, well, where do I get started? I mean, you guys have a ton of episodes. Where do I get started? Let me encourage you just to go to our website, go to chooseify.com/start, join our email list. And over the next several days, weeks, and months, we are going to give you bite-sized pieces of information to get you started on your path to FI, to help you kind of traverse this journey towards financial independence. It will be well worth your time to make this one of your action steps this week. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.